going to do a little bit of review and get some of, at least my thoughts, on biosecurity. I'll give a filtration update. We've filtered quite a few farms, as well as have some data from others out there as we look at PRRS filtration. Some immunologic review on the sow side and on the wean to finish side. Sow farm cleanup, some epidemiologic data, and then some summary comments, which I think as an industry we have to start moving toward. So that's kind of the rundown of what we'll talk through. So biosecurity, we've been through a lot of this before. Animal semen, fomites, air are really the big driving buckets of how we move this bug around. On the animal side, right, if we move animals around, this is the easy one. They propagate the virus. They may manufacture more of it. When we move them around, we move the factory around. It's shed about out of everything a pig produces and can be found there. On sow herd side, the first time in my career, I think I saved a sow herd by dumping a GDU over the past 2 weeks. So having an isolation quarantine facility, bringing gilts direct into a farm, not every group and not many groups, but once in a decade period of time, those are critical things to have. And at the cost of a PRRS break, if you don't have isolation and quarantine with good testing, at some point in time it will happen to you if you're bringing outside animals into your farm. So testing, placement, I get asked often, what's the risk of, even transporting genetics across Iowa or across I-90 or I-80? Great question. I don't know. In this scenario, the GDU that the gilts came from tested negative and remained negative. So I have oral fluids literally the day they arrive, 30 minutes off the truck, and I've got a negative GDU from where they came from. Seems logical. Do I have the exact test and, or found exactly which truck they were riding behind to pick it up? It seems logical and likely. We don't know that, but testing as well as isolation are critical. Wean to finish, all in, all out flow, continuous flow sites. They may work for a while, but at some point, typically, at least with clients I work with, finding a break, some type of a bubble depop, maybe not, a traditional nursery with 2 finishers on one site. We have to make a break to stop that. Or as the industry is moving toward all in, all out production. Continuous flow is a pretty high risk for this disease. So semen, it is still a risk today. You need to understand where your semen supplier is, what their testing protocols are, how frequently, and what the downtime from the day of delivery to usage is, and does your extender time frame and timeline match? D&D, fomites. D&D is critical. When the electrician comes into the farm and says, I haven't been around any pigs, BS. You're showering in, showering out, and your equipment's going to get here a day ahead of time, or you don't come in. It's got to be that way, guys, especially at the sow farm level. At minimum, 1 hour and dry are critical elements after a disinfection. Those are just bare minimum requirements. This virus doesn't last very long when we heat it up and dry it out. But when we don't do some simple, basic, easy things, right? We aren't building rockets here, guys. This is pretty easy stuff. So trucks, transport, we are failing as an industry on our transport biosecurity. It is abysmal. Dirty fat hog trucks, sanitation on trucks. Have you ever audited a truck wash or audited a clean trailer? I would argue about 90% of these fail. We are bad at this, and we all really squeeze and squeeze and squeeze on what our transport cost is, right? We're a competitive bunch in this room, but we do this really, really bad. So this is one area that, from an industry standpoint, we need to reevaluate cost and value on transport. Air, there's a lot of new knowledge. We do continue to learn. On On the aerosol side, and Dr. Scott Diaz has done a lot of this work. He joined our group here about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he's done a lot of quantification of what are we finding when we sample air. And sampling air is, to me, conceptually difficult, but really we bubble a whole lot of air through a bunch of liquid and test the liquid. It's not much more complex than that. But what we're finding is the quantity outside of known positive farms with the viral isolates we're looking at today, it's gone up. So either we're getting better at concentrating it into that liquid, or we're finding higher viral quantities coming out of the pig. So there's a few hypotheses around that. The other thing we know of is, and this has been proven for long periods of time, viral quantities in vaccinated pigs are lower. Okay, this is, that data is out there. It's been out there. We get reduced lung lesions. There are lots of good things. Is the vaccine perfect? Not a bit. But if we look at our toolkit, we got do nothing and vaccine, and keep them clean. There's not a lot of options. So, a good idea around the sow farm, if you control or work with your neighbors, vaccination around the sow farm is probably not a bad idea. And I'll show you some data here coming up on that. So this is that data. So project one, and so we have finishers around lots of our sow farms. And so the theory behind this is if we have a known wean to finish site break near one of our sow farms, okay, let's list the set of options. I've got do nothing, leave them there. They can blow sky high. I've got vaccinate them, and I've got move them. Okay, well, for those of you who've tried to pick up a 2,400 head set of wean to finish pigs, and there's a barn literally ready the day that that site breaks and ready to receive them, we don't just have barns sitting around, guys. It's how many pounds per square foot can I get per year, back to the competitiveness side. So what we did is we infected one room, and we challenged both rooms, and we vaccinated one side. And we tested those pigs in various time points, etc. And basically, so do I have an option if I've got a finisher near a sow farm breaking, can I vaccinate it and at least reduce the number of days that that barn is shedding? So it's just a tool. Does that tool or piecework? So what we found out of that, if we vaccinated a group that was infected 1 week prior, we significantly reduced the number of days we could find virus in the air. Okay? Didn't take to zero, but we reduced the number of what we call positive air days. So we found 17 positive air days spread over 31 net total days. Okay? So there were some non-positive air days intermixed in that. The non-vaccinates shed virus for a total of 45 shedding days, but for a whole total from first shedding day to last shedding day was 70. So while it's not perfect, now I can reduce risk. This is an odds ratio game. So if I know of a finisher breaking right next to my sow farm, it becomes an option. Not mandatory. If I've got a place to pick them up and move them and off-site, that's better. But it's an option. So that was study one. This has been published in 2011. So project two is more the traditional way, right? We want to vaccinate pigs, and then if they break, okay, well, what happens then? And this we've just finished. I don't know as we have all the data in, but it's basically a similar experimental design. Just the fact that we vaccinated before versus after. So similar type scenario. And we look at when we infected the barn, which is, I got shaky hands, but when we infected the barn that we infected with wild type virus only shed for a net 5 days in the air. Realize we can still pick up serologic PCR positives. This is just detection in air outside of the fans. So we've dramatically reduced the risk to that sow farm when that wean to finish barn breaks right next door. So again, it's a tool in our toolkit. Is it the perfect thing on earth? Nope. We still had wild type virus shedding. Yep. But we shortened it up quite a bit. We reduced the risk. So then we talk a little about filtered farms, and they've been, an interesting challenge over the past few years. And how many in the room have a filtered farm or work with a filter farm, or show of hands? A few out there? Okay. It's a lot of fun, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff, filtering, the original work that was done on a double L trailer, right? Those are pretty easy to seal. Okay. You filter a 6,000 sow farm, there's a lot of cracks and crevices you find. So filter bypass really is where you have non-filtered air coming into a farm. And that can come in many ways. Open a door, filter bypass. Coming around the filter, around the gaskets, cracks in the concrete. Drains, we all think we've got a nice little water drain in the bottom of every drain. We don't. We learn these things over time. So the data as we take we've seen, we've had filtered farm breaks, and there are many out there in the industry. But is there value in that as a tool for reducing PRRS in the industry? It looks like yes. Okay, is it cost effective? I don't know. We got to sharpen our pencils and do the math. Our data would indicate we've seen about a 61% reduction in PRRS break frequency on filtered farms. Okay, and so that's comparing pre-filtration to post-filtration PRRS break frequency. So if we look at the cost per space of a filtered farm, it's going to be somewhere between $130 and $260, depending on barn layout. Is a 61% reduction cost efficacious to do? This is business. So is it important to do that or not? Well, there's enough filtered farms out there right now that this data point is going to get a lot more clear. There's a range around that mean that we aren't 100% sure of. So is it worth that in value in lost opportunity or an increased cost, however you measure it, whether it's a direct cost model or opportunity cost model? It's important to think about. Is that exactly the right number? No, that's what our data looks like at this point. And we'll get more as time goes on. So, and this would be a chart showing those farms pre and post filtration. You can definitely see less black dots in the post filtration time over here than prior. Okay, good news, it's a reduction. Bad news, it's not zero. So it'll be interesting to measure this over time. How often are our farms challenged? So we've just repeated this fall again, but we took 4 recipient farms. Okay, so air outside of our filtered sow farms, and then out of what we considered a source farm. And there we just sampled the exhaust fan. So this was last March, which would be what we consider a high-risk time of the year, right? Between 30 and 40 degrees, high humidity, an analogous time, depending on what your latitude and longitude is, would be really probably from October 1st through mid-December, okay? So high-risk times of year. And really we wanted to figure out how often does a sow farm get challenged, or at least the air is potentially infected. And so source farm and one of the sow farms. So what we found in those 30 days, we found PRRS virus at those frequencies outside of those farms. We had one farm down in Iowa where last spring it was really, really warm. We didn't pick up one day of positive air. But it's pretty impressive, the frequency that we found positive air samples. Now clearly, what doesn't fit is clearly if I've got that much positive air and that much pressure on a sow farm, we don't break at that frequency, right? So there must be some inherent immunity that a pig has that does some blockage, but at some point something gets through. So, and we repeated this fall, and the number of viruses we found, I believe Scott said he found 5 viruses in one sample. So we don't have that data out, but it's kind of interesting. So anyway, it's food for thought there. As far as we're trying to get some metric of how frequently farms get challenged. So a little more data there, and here's some diversity from last spring. You know, and these weren't those sow farms' PRRS viruses. So, so anyway, viral loads seem to be higher. Whether that's you know, significant or not, we aren't 100% sure. Aerosol challenge happens more frequently than what we maybe previously thought, right? We used to think maybe it blow around once a year, if you're lucky, not at all that year. But, you know, there are defense mechanisms that the animals have that protect them. The viral diversity was quite high. We found different bugs floating around. So then we go on to another study where, and I'll get to some epi data here in a little bit, but pigs shed, if a single pig will shed PRRS in its feces for 7 days. Now in a population, right, as the virus moves through that population, it's not just 7 days for the whole barn, 7 days from when that pig was infected until he's done shedding, but in that time he might have infected 3 or 4 or 5 other pigs, you know, through that cascade. It survives in slurry for about 14 days, so in the pit, and that's at 40 degrees, and at normal pit temperatures, which are between 50 and 60 days, or 50 and 60 degrees, it survives for about 5. Pit's pretty caustic and toxic to this stuff. It's not a very good environment to live in. You know, we wanted to test if virus is aerosolized during agitation or during application of fields. So, you know, what we did is we found a finisher breaking with PRRS, confirmed, we bled the pigs, found it in their fecal material, found it in the pit, tested the applicator, put this little air collection doohickey in the back of a truck, drove parallel with the thing, found it in that, and then collected air about 100 meters, give or take, downwind of it, found that virus in all of those points. So yes, we can, and this will pair with some of the epi data that I'll show you in a bit. So we'll skip off of that and move kind of into vaccines, okay, and gets back to the bucket of what tools do we have. So we have biosecurity, we've got location, right? We can all move to Montana, Wyoming, or no pigs, you know, pay a lot for corn out there. We got vaccines. There are vaccines on the market. And these are they. You know, we got our new product this year, which is the first one for, I think 98 is when ATP came out. Fostera got launched last spring-ish. There are killed products out there, MJ, Sera, autogenous products. So we just got to look at what tools do we even have in the arsenal. A lot of the work has been done around BI's products. They've been on the market the longest. They probably got the best data and studies related to them on the market. And so hopefully we get more data-based decisions. You know, these have been proven, guys, for years. Reduced lung lesions, duration of viremia, shedding via aerosols, we've proven. And they do improve certain production parameters. On a big picture standpoint, we can show on a flow it will pull mortality rates down or take the tops off. But it doesn't take to zero, right? We're all looking for that magic PRRS vaccine. It ain't out there. Or I haven't found it yet. If somebody knows of it, give me a call. So if we look at those. Now that didn't come through as well as what I have it on my computer. But this is an interesting study on sows. And so this is Daniel Linares and John Paul Cano up at University of Minnesota. And we move into, okay, what's the best way to run my sow herd? Okay, is it negative naive? Is it positive stable with wild type virus? Is it vaccine? Is it some combination of those? This is the first data set. This is a great data set, guys. This was presented at Layman last fall. Looking and trying to get some data on what's the right platform to do. Because I can't use serum on sow A and use modified live vaccine on sow B and nothing on sow C, right? The cross pollinate or co-infect each other. So what they did here is they compared 61 sow herds, and they looked at two basic parameters: time to negative pig production. So from the time a new break at a sow farm occurs until I get negatives, and then time to baseline production, meaning I get back to where I was productivity-wise before the break. So two different parameters they measured. And then they looked at LVI, or serum, versus vaccine. Those are really the outcomes that they wanted to look at. And what they found was, if I want negative pigs quicker, serum gets me negative pigs quicker after a break by between 6 and 9 weeks, statistically, in this data set of 61 PRRS breaks. Okay? So there's a value there. But if I look at time to baseline production, I get to baseline production, or my net total losses of pigs are the lowest when I use vaccine in a PRRS break. Okay? So very different outcomes. What is my goal? Is negative pigs more important, or is throughput more important? Okay? The third parameter they looked at was if the sow herd was positive prior to a PRRS break. So if I had a seropositive sow herd, whether it was from vaccine or serum, they made no delineation. What was better? Being positive pre-break to A strain got me to negative pigs more quickly. So out of that, we get baseline production, probably with vaccine. Okay? We get negative pigs with serum, and if I'm previously positive, a break isn't as bad. Really kind of the net summary there. Now, we did some internal economics of it and put a value of a negative pig versus a positive pig. Everybody can do this exercise on what they value a negative pig at versus a positive pig coming into their wean to finish system. And we put a $7 delta on a negative pig versus a positive pig. So disadvantage positive pig by $7. It's still more economical at $7 to get throughput than it is to have negative pigs in our model. It may be different on your farms. So you can figure out if I get negative pigs 9 weeks more quickly, is it a higher value proposition than I've got to have throughput, and I have yardage expense against that. So throughput versus negative pig, where is your number at is an important thing to look at. I apologize, this slide is messed up. I run a Mac, and it's coming through on the IBM a little bit different. So really, LVI herds reach negative sooner. Modified live vaccines had less total losses. The median time to negative was 210 days. So we all do these 30-week closures, right? And I got an off-site gilt breeding project. 30 weeks later, those gilts got to come into the farm. That's the median time, guys. That means half the herds at 210 days weren't negative yet. So just programming your gilt breeding project for 30 weeks isn't enough or isn't correct on half the projects out there. That's why we get re-breaks post-closure on these farms. So then sliding into the epidemiologic data. And this is Steve Toussaint and Bob Morrison's data and this National Pork Board data. And, every fall, right, my workload in midsummer, life's great. We figured out the PRRS monster, and we feel great about everything. We conquered it. And then about mid-October, we start feeling like idiots again. But, so here's the last 4 years' worth of data, okay? And the EMWA is basically a threshold set in flu by the CDC for flu surveillance. But basically between the last 4 years, between the 13th and 19th of October, every year from an industry standpoint, or at least the herds that are participating in that, we start breaking with PRRS. We all thought this year was earlier, right? Crops were out, we started pumping manure earlier, on and on and on. At least from the data, it was the same. We're within a 5-day period of time as far as predictability. What can we do with this data, right? From a system standpoint, we know when PRRS breaks are going to start occurring. at least in the upper Midwest. These would be herds primarily in the upper Midwest. What can I do to plan from a throughput or pig flow, etc.? If I've got 20 farms, I know some of them are going to break. If I'm in the upper Midwest, I can start using some predictability there to ensure pig flow through a system. So this data comes from 11 participating systems across the upper Midwest, and it at least gives us some time spatial events to when PRRS is going on across the U.S. And this is aggregate incidents, and so the purple line here really is this year. And so we had maybe a more rapid climb there in October, November than previous years, but 2010-11 was a little worse than where we are right now. We kind of clipped underneath that blue line. And so is this the worst PRRS year ever? Well, it kind of depends on the week that we look at it. Or at least we have this data set now, and it's pretty interesting to start looking at it. So kind of my summary comments. As an industry, we got to start working together in a strategic way. There are a lot of regional control programs, at least monitoring programs. I can't say there's been this massive success, but we're at least starting to pull back the covers and look at things from a strategic or global level. And that's important. We need to get to data, not what stuff worked on the last experience. I'm a veterinarian. I'm guilty of it as everybody is. Our last experience dictates what we think will work in the next experience. We've got to get away from that. We've got to use data to do that. We need research. A couple simple little trials on do I give PRRS vaccine pre or post challenge. We learned a heck of a lot of stuff. There's about 50 permutations that we could do of that need to get done out there. They're important. We as an industry, we're guilty. Okay, we cut corners, we cut costs. We're competitive guys, right? I can get away with that, 9 times out of 10. But that 1 time out of 10 costs, a couple $1,000,000. We need to learn on that. Downtime, sanitation, transport, all of those things have more inherent value than a dime per space per day. We got to start adding that in to get better. So I'll get off my soapbox now.